Welcome to Fraction of a Teacher, a podcast where two early career teachers chat about what we're learning and what we've still got to learn in the wild world of teaching. I'm Francis.
And I'm Jen. We're back, but this time it's a little different. We were PTC trainees and now we're early career teachers stepping into our first full year in the classroom. We share the reality of life as new teachers, the wins, the wobbles, and everything in between. So let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to Fraction of a Teacher. Hi, Francis. How are you?
Hi, Jen. Good. Good to see you again and enjoying those last few days of the long summer holiday. Yeah, increasingly looking at lesson planning and thinking ahead to, next week. How about you? You getting a bit of a break as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Did a little bit of reffing last night because I ref soccer. So did a little bit of reffing last night. So yeah, keeping busy. Really looking forward to getting back in the classroom. I'm just so excited, and restarting the podcast last week definitely made it ready for business.
That's good. Has been good. It's getting back into that mindset, and the podcast is a good way of just reminding ourselves of, I suppose, what it's like to be a teacher, which links really nicely to our topic today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So today we are diving into the teaching standard part 2, and this one's a biggie. It's all about personal and professional conduct. So basically how we show up as teachers, not just in the classroom, but also in our wider community, talking a lot about how we carry ourselves. It's really the stuff that nobody puts in lesson plans, but it shapes whether you're seen as a professional, including kind of how we handle some of those beliefs in the classroom. I just think this one has so many layers, don't you, buddy?
Yeah, I think what's good about the teacher standards is that they really set out really clearly on like that nice one-page summary exactly what is expected of you once you're a qualified teacher. Yeah, I think it says much though some of it feels like common sense. I think it's really good to have that kind of clarity. And yeah, that's why we thought we'd unpack both part 2, where we're going to start today, and then the other parts in part 1 as well about teaching over the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we jump in with a starter, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about PGCE, the ITT, ECF as well. Would that be cool with you?
Perfect. And you mentioned you had a starter planned.
Always. You know me with my reflective questions. I'm all over it. Got a nice little one for you here. So thinking about kind of first impressions and thinking about that conduct that we're about to start talking about, what's one thing a teacher did when you were in school that instantly made you see them as professional?
Now, there's loads of examples. I think probably there were a couple of particularly senior leadership team members in one of my placement schools who I thought really kind of exemplified this, their presence within the school and the way that they were out and about in corridors, in playgrounds, really positively engaging with pupils, getting to know pupils, building those positive relationships with pupils, maintaining standards, but doing it in a way that kind of worked with pupils, showing a kind of mutual respect in the way that they did that, and also picking up bits of litter themselves, showing a pride in the school. So I think for me, that kind of exemplifies aspects of those expectations. And I think I like the way they did it and the style in which they did it. Those would probably be the sort of first example that pops into my mind. What about you?
Yeah, I love that. I think mine's very similar. It's those professionals I saw, the teachers that just treated us with so much genuine respect when they were actively listening. They weren't talking down to students or us as student teachers. You know, we were all on this journey together. When I saw that in a teacher, you could see the pride going along with it. You could see that they were proud to be a teacher. You could see that they were honest and they were integral, and their kids were the center of their world because they wanted them to do well. So I think so much comes with the respect, but it was the ones that kept it cool when things were going terribly wrong, or if they were kicking off, there was that instant, I can shut this down. That level of control and doing it in a way without shouting or slamming books. When a teacher has that, and you can see that positive relationship built, instantly I think they're professional, because they get the job.
Yeah, and I think it's tough. And I think I've seen sort of a whole range of examples. Some teachers have got those skills more than others. And I suppose I'm kind of conscious that it's amazing when you watch someone who's got that, who's really great at the way they deal with pupils and that remaining calm and, listening and able to work well with pupils. But I suppose it's just often they're quite experienced teachers, and it's just working out how, from the stage we're at, how do we sort of get there quickly?
Yeah, and you said something last season, I think it was the episode with Jeremy, where you talked about this is one of the most intense jobs where you feel like you have 5 or 6 back-to-back hour-long meetings in a row in a day. And it's quite an intense workplace. You're right, because there is an element of we have a life, but we have to make sure that nothing reflects badly on the career and the trust that the parents, the students, the school put in us as teachers. There's something about making sure that we're doing that even when we're off the clock as well. So it's not about never switching off, but I don't know any teacher that has 5 full days every single day. You know, you do have your PPA, you do have time off in terms of your day, but you've got to be able to manage that and keep your conduct respectful at all times. So this is clearly what we're talking about.
I think it might be worth taking a quick step back and I can explain some of my understanding, I think, about the teacher standards and I suppose how that links to us. And then perhaps we go back and have another look at the detail in that part too.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. So do you want to explain a little bit about that? Because I feel like you've got a mind map in front of you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you may have a mind map in front of you.
You can probably see it there on this. It's yeah, absolutely. So my understanding is very much that the teacher standards introduced in 2012 was the first point at which a single set of overarching standards for teachers had been provided, bringing in a whole lot of kind of fragmented standards from other areas and bringing them to a single place, setting the minimum bar, if you like, for qualified teacher status. And therefore, that's what we clearly had to demonstrate. We were meeting through our course to get QTS, to get that qualified teacher status in our first year. And what we'll need to demonstrate that we're continuing to meet throughout our careers now as a holder of qualified teacher status. And my understanding is not only is it the kind of measure of where we need to all be, but also the flip side of that, I suppose, is if we're not performing to the standard required, then that's the standard against which we can be, and rightly will be held to account by the Teacher Regulation Agency. If there's instances where we're falling below those standards expected, effectively that's the standard against which we're going to be judged. So I think that for me was quite useful to just understand a bit of the background there. The other bit I wanted to make sure I got clear in my mind is the relationship between the teacher standards and the ITT ECF, which is that initial teacher training and early career framework. So both government documents, Department for Education, and my understanding is the ITT ECF is effectively the framework we follow at both in our initial teacher training and then in our first 2 years as ECTs to make sure that we meet the teacher standards by the end of that training. So effectively, it's the teacher standards is the head mark, and the ITT ECF makes sure we've got that kind of structure to get there. And when you look at the ITT ECF, it's sort of broken down using the same headings as the teacher standards. And I think something I haven't really fully got my head around yet is exactly how we do that, kind of demonstrating that we're meeting them. I think that's something I'm looking forward to getting into in my school, is understanding how do I evidence that I'm meeting the standards so that I can be judged to have completed that ECT over the next couple of years. I don't know if you've got any more information on that, but certainly that's something I think will differ a little bit by providers exactly how we do that. But that's something I'm conscious I need to know more about.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really good explanation of that. It's almost like the ITT ECF is the recipe and the teacher standards is the final dish that we're expected to serve. Is that?
I like it. I mean,
it's lunchtime, by the way, so I'm a little bit hungry.
Anytime there's food involved in there. No, absolutely. I think that, yeah, you've got it.
I'm happy to summarize that well. Now, they don't include part 2 on that, but it's always there. It's how we carry ourselves. It's that trust. It's the professional boundaries we keep. It's even how our personal behavior outside of the school reflects back on us as teachers. And it's a big document. We're talking lots of pages, and there is a lovely 1-page summary that me and Francis both have in front of our folders that we have for this year, but there's a lot of information on it. And it can look really overwhelming when you're looking at it going, how am I going to meet every one of these standards? But a lot of those things you already do really well. So when we're thinking about that celebrating and making sure that when you're looking at this list, you're probably doing a lot of these things already without realizing, because it's just a part of who you are. It's a part of your teacher identity already. Would you agree, Francis?
Yeah, and I think when I look through part 1 of the teacher standards about setting high expectations, promoting good progress, demonstrating good subject knowledge, and so on, I feel like many of those are going to be quite a long journey. Like, I feel like my ability, part 1, standard 4, to plan and teach well-structured lessons, I feel like I can do the basics, but I still feel like I've got a long way to develop in that. And I think across a lot of those, they're quite ambitious, the teacher standards. I would suggest for everyone in for every teacher in England to be meeting those, they're pretty ambitious. And I feel like I've got a long way to go to really be kind of outstanding in any of those. I think that's where part 2 of the teacher standards, the personal and professional conduct feels to me like it shouldn't require that kind of same level of necessity of practice and experience. And in many ways, those expectations, I think, are sort of very absolute, and you've got to have those from the very start of your initial teacher training, and not just during a lesson, not just in the classroom, not just in the school, as you were saying, that actually there's consistently high sort of professional standards. And I suppose one bit that I think really sticks out to me is that that's both inside and outside school. And I think for me, that's it's pretty big. There's only so many professions have that very high kind of bar of personal professional standards, both in the workplace and outside. And I suppose that comes back to the credibility of the teaching profession. But yeah, for me, that part too is pretty fundamental underlying expectation for all of us.
I can't remember who it was, but someone said to me about this golden thread of teacher development. Have you heard this?
No, but I think I can see what they mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this golden thread of this framework that ECF, there's different names it's kind of passed through as well, but currently it's this framework. It goes from ITT to ECT and then this ongoing CPD, and it's all anchored by the same standards. So you start as you mean to go on, which is how we approach our teaching the same way. So setting up good expectations in the very beginning, starting with really good habits to go on the same way. And it feels like this is very much following that same philosophy of keep going this way throughout the, longevity of your career as a teacher.
Absolutely. I think something that I found interesting in my placement schools, linking back to that kind of inside and outside school, and sort of, you're always a teacher. It's not something that stops when you walk out the school gates. One of my placement schools, a lot of the pupils there lived very near me, and I used to sort of quite often kind of see them outside school. They'd be in the village where I lived. And I think that was quite interesting, and whilst I like to think my behaviour is appropriate all the time, I had no concerns. It was just, I was very conscious that actually I was still Mr. G in, the place where I live, that when I go shopping in town, I see the pupils, that actually I'm still very much the teacher, and I maybe dress differently, not only in a suit when I'm out shopping or out with my kids and things, but actually that it still is incumbent on me to maintain that kind of professional relationship. And I think, for me, part of that is not completely shying away from, if you see them saying a nice good afternoon or good morning, and showing that we can sort of professionally interact outside the classroom as well, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that's quite important for me, and how I kind of plan to be, not being afraid to say hi, but also giving them and hoping that they give me the space once outside of school. But yeah, that's something I'm kind of conscious of, living fairly near to the school where I'll be working. The reality is we will see our pupils out and about occasionally. I mean, have you sort of seen many of your pupils outside of school? Does that happen to you particularly, or do you live in quite a different area?
So in my new school, no, I haven't seen any of my new students, but during my placement school, I actually reffed a few games of a few students. And that was a great experience, because when I was kind of reffing games, I was like, oh gosh. And actually at one point in time, one of my students gave me a yellow card in my classroom because I got an equation wrong on the board. So it was a great conversation, and it really did help us develop those relationships. But yeah, we kind of both played for the same football club, so I would see them if I was training as well. But yeah, I saw a few of them, and it was, it took me back for a second because I didn't have my lanyard. I didn't, I was in shorts. I don't teach in shorts. I felt very exposed. But no, I then realized that actually this is my life still, and you can still be yourself, but there just needs to be a line about those boundaries, and you just be yourself, but you be a good version of you. I'm showing them what a good role model is.
I think you're right. And actually, I think that role model bit's so important. Beyond, neither of us are kind of pure detailed mathematicians. I think we've come into teaching because we hope what we can offer, bringing some of that life experience and hopefully being a kind of good role model to our pupils. And I think that, as you say, that actually is really healthy for them to see that we don't just live at the school, that we do more with our life. Something else I'm really looking forward to outside the classroom is getting involved with other activities at the school, particularly Duke of Edinburgh, which is already sort of going through the training for to be involved with at my school. Because I think when I've been involved in extracurricular clubs, two placement schools, it was really nice, I think, for the pupils to see you outside the classroom. You're not trying to run quite such a formal routine. So I think that was really good. And that's something I'm kind of enjoyed and looking forward to again.
Yeah. So something about developing student relationships really well. And I think that's a really important aspect, that when you do see your students outside, it's an extension of you developing your relationship. Doesn't mean you need to go hang out with them, But if you see them, you are a human being. And it's another opportunity for them to see you as a human, not just their teacher. And we don't just exist in the classroom. Thinking out loud now, I think that's why they talk about part 2 being personal and professional, because you know you're going to see students. Teachers I've spoken to have talked about the fact they've seen their students outside the classroom years after they've taught them. So your role as a teacher doesn't just end in the 4 walls of your classroom. There's a bigger community that you're a part of. And I believe that's why they've put professional and personal conduct in there, because they realize that. And I quite like it personally.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I quite like it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. And I think looking back on my previous career, it was not dissimilar in that, when you live and work in a confined environment like a ship with a whole lot of people, you've got both the very professional relationship in terms of, on duty, on the job, but also you will see each other outside. It's important that you are able to still be human, but be very professional and understand that there's still boundaries, there's still codes of conduct. And so actually a lot of this feels really familiar to me from my previous profession. And I think it's great to see it so clearly laid out. I really like the showing respect, like the treating pupils with dignity and building relationships rooted in mutual respect. I'm sure I've said this quote already on the podcast because I really love it. But the quotes, I think it's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's this: treat a man like he is, he will remain as he is. Treat them as they can and should be, and they will become what they can and should be. For me, that's something that I feel is quite kind of fundamental to how I wish to approach my teaching. If we treat small children like small children and shout at them and demand them some things of them in an inappropriate way, I feel like they will remain small children. If we can help them grow and build confidence, and we treat them with that respect and treat them as very high expectations, treating them almost like adults, I think that's something I'm really keen to be able to do. And hopefully I can find the way of making that work really well. But I think that's important for me is treating them how they should be and how I expect them to behave, and helping them live up to that.
I love Emerson as a quotist. He was can never say the word, it's a transcendentist. It was a movement. It was like a philosophy movement about emphasizing individualization. I really loved it. Talked about a lot in psychology, naturally. But yeah, I love all his quotes. Nothing great is ever done without enthusiasm is my favorite quote of his. And I feel like it's a life mantra. Don't know if you can see that about me, Francis. But
I meant that. I'm sure in some of the draft content for the website, I'm sure you've got, I think it's that quote actually in there.
Yeah, so, good spotting. Yes, it does.
Talking of, I'm dropping a little advert for the website coming up to internet near you soon.
I have a question for you.
Go on.
So just quickly going back to the ITT ECF, did you feel the learn that or the learn how to statements to be most useful during your PGCE for you when you were kind of thinking about that even now?
That's a tricky question.
So just to give anyone a guidance, when you open the ITT ECF, there's a few pages of information, and then you talk about the initial teacher training and early careers framework. And every standard is broken down to 2 sections. You have a learn that section and learn how to section. And whilst they're linked, they offer different avenues of information for you to take from. So for instance, if you go for high expectations, standard 1, the first line is learn that teachers have the ability to affect and improve the well-being, motivation, and behavior of their pupils. And to counter that, learn how to communicate a belief in the academic potential to all students by using intentional and consistent language that promotes, challenges, and inspires. So there's a very clear difference, but they act on the same standard. So, question, which was more helpful for you?
I feel like I quite like the brevity of the learn that elements. And my personal view is I'm not convinced it needs to be spelled out as 2 separate columns. And I wonder if perhaps there will be enhanced clarity by having a single statement. But that's just my personal view. But yeah, so I can see the benefit of having that sort of two different statements. But I suppose in my mind, I've almost tried to have a sort of single takeaway point for each. I'm sort of bringing those together. Does that
makes sense? I like that.
Sense?
Yeah, I can see how that works for you because you're very you like to be organized, and you're a great teacher. Like you can pick something apart with your mind map and actually really explore what that means for you. And that's a real strength of who you are.
I don't know. I think maybe I'm just simple. I like the picture in the mind map, but you're right. Yeah, if it was me, it'd be a mind map. What about you? Do you feel like, I suppose, noting that this is going to be a big part of our demonstrating that we're meeting the standards for the next couple of years. What about you? How do you think you sort of find these easiest to interpret?
I prefer the learn how to, because I hate starting from a blank page. So for me to learn how to, I can see very clearly what example evidence that I can then use to meet that. And for instance, setting tasks that stretch pupils which are achievable within a challenging curriculum is another point under communicate a belief of academic potential. Now, if you said to me, learn how to communicate a belief of academic potential, I would have sat there going, yeah, I'm not sure. I would have spent more time than needed to, almost getting myself in a bit of a muddle about specifically what that meant. When actually there's 4 points below that give you an idea of what they're looking for and how I can do something. And that helps me to make a to-do list, to think about what I want to do next, to check myself off against that standard, learn that teachers have the ability to affect and improve the well-being of motivation of their pupils. Yeah, that for me feels very, I know that, because that's what a teacher in my eyes does. I got into teaching to make an impact on young people. But how I can do that and how I can evidence that to show that I'm serving the final dish, the finished product, if I'm struggling to meet a standard, I can go here and go, that's what I should be looking for. Cool. Okay. That gives me an idea of what I'm doing. And I'm a perfectionist. I want to be really good at everything. So it's nice to know that some of these things I can go, I'm doing that really well already. Okay, cool. This is a really good standard for me because feels natural to me.
And you're so right. The fact that you will, I know, work so hard to make sure that you've got the evidence and you've really understood what's being asked for and then can demonstrate that. I think that's going to be important because I think over the next 2 years, we're going to have to do quite a bit of being really clear about unpacking this and explaining how we are getting there. I've got a quick question for you. One of the parts in part 2 of the teacher standards, in terms of not undermining fundamental British values and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs, do you think that's something that you'll be able to sort of work into your maths teaching as well? Do you see a role there in terms of not just maintaining your own conduct, but actually, I suppose, promoting British values and promoting tolerance of others? Do you see there's something as a role for that in maths itself?
Oh, 100%. I think especially the British value about being tolerant of other viewpoints, especially in math, because we can be weaving those examples through the whole curriculum. So thinking about voting systems or equality in statistics, or, when you're looking at graphs about propaganda and how someone is reporting something and how they've skewed that, within group work. I think there's so much there within math and being a core subject. And we're so lucky to have so much time in their timetable. Yeah, I think there's so much to do in maths that we could really be thinking about upholding those standards, but may not be directly obvious, but yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a truly, really global. The one school I did a placement in, they had a brilliant display down one of the walls. Yeah, it was the origins of maths and across different cultures and different time periods, and it was really cool. It just showed how it's a sort of a combined effort. It's just linked beautifully to history, to religion, to geography. Yeah, I feel like it's. If I'm honest, I sometimes find it tricky when I'm deep into planning a lesson. I suppose I don't think I'm as good as I'd like to be at identifying where there's opportunities to promote those values or to kind of bring in kind of more cultural and historical aspects of maths. I think I'm always conscious as well of sort of cognitive overload and giving too much information, but I think done in the right way, particularly with perhaps higher performing, higher retaining sets, I think it's got real potential. And you're right, you've just identified a whole lot of options there for doing so.
Yeah, well, math has been around for centuries. It's really important for us to show that history as well. And that's where our SC can come in as well, without going, well, actually, do you know that this came from the Greek? And actually, if you take the word algebra, it's about taking things apart. You could really start unpicking this with your students and giving them information that it's not just about learning how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. It's about fostering a love for math and understanding how vital this is to life. That's why math is so amazing.
I think you're brilliant. I think the fact that you've already, and I know from some of the work you did in our PGC that you've already done to bring in, that kind of spiritual, moral, social and cultural development into maths. I think it's awesome. Yeah, I feel like I've still got some way to go on that, but it's it's the sort of thing that I really believe we should be doing. Again, coming back to that point, we're not just there to help people secure a certain grade at GCSE maths. It's much, much broader than
Yeah. And if I have got any of those answers wrong, please don't kill me out there, math teachers. I've been on summer for far too long. Let me get back into it first. I'm a little bit rusty. But yeah, I think there's so much we can do in mathematics to really promote those British values and really like shape our young people to be wonderful human beings ready for society.
The other bit I was going to mention, because that was quite broad. One thing that I kind of noticed on digging into this in preparation for the podcast was that part 2, the personal professional conduct, also sort of specifically mentions the ethos, policies and practices of the school in which you teach. And I think that's kind of an interesting one, because whereas I think it's one of the few where I suppose there's an element of adapting to the local requirements and aligning with your school. And I think we've talked a bit before about how important it is to try and find a school to work in where you feel aligned with their ethos, with their kind of priorities and things. And I suppose that's something I'm conscious of at the moment. I like to think that the school I'm going to be working at from next month is very well aligned with me, or I'm well aligned with it one way or the other. But also I'm working through making sure I've understood their policies and the way they go about things, read as much as I can on how the school does its business so that I can align with that. So yeah, I suppose that's just something I'm conscious of at this time, as we went into schools for our placements. But I suppose even more important this time as we'll be on our own in the room right from the start.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think it's really important to note that while the teaching standards exist, you're right, they need to be in line with the school's policies as well, because rightly so, every school will have its own vision, its own values, its culture, sometimes written as a model, a lot of behavioral policies, but we are expected as teachers to model and reinforce those values, even if they're not necessarily identical with our own personal style. And it's really about that, like almost like professional, like regard. So respecting the shared mission of a school community, not pushing against it, because we need to have consistency with the pupils. Mixed messages can be really hard for them. The parents and putting their trust in us to respect the school values. So those parents have chosen that school because of the values and the mission that they believe is in line with who they are and how they want their kids raised as well. So the teaching standards and the school's policies should work hand in hand. You should be looking at both, and it's not one versus the other. This is a basis of where we're starting from, and you should go from there. Would you agree with that, Francis?
Absolutely. And I think something you brought up there actually is a really good point about parents. And I think not only do we need to be professional in our interactions with our pupils, both inside and outside school, with our colleagues, but actually also with parents. And I think parents and guardians, that's such an important relationship. I've seen the power of having a good link with parents, how parents can be so helpful in terms of, working with you to get the best out of their pupils. But I think that personal professional conduct is just so critical for how parents perceive you and how you can build those strong working relationships with parents that allow you and them to work together for the best interests of their children. So yeah, parents is a really good point. And I don't think it's specifically mentioned in part 2, but yeah, I think that's really key.
Yeah, the whole thing talks about kind of forging positive professional relationships. And it says, and work with parents in the best interest of their pupils. So at the very top of the standards, there's a little bit of a blurb at the very top. And within that talks about working with parents. We've talked about this when we were talking about Parents' Evening and how important it is and how we would like Parents' Evening to run if we had a magic wand. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about parents now when we're talking about how we conduct ourselves as teachers. So yeah, makes perfect sense. There's so much to it. We said this was a biggie, and it really is.
Well, we've only done one part. And I think actually, we're lucky we get to do this podcast, because as we go through and unpack those different elements of part 1 of the teacher standards, each time we do that, I think it's going to help us think about how we're measuring up and how we can evidence that and priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's been an awesome dive into that first part. What were your thoughts for a sort of plenary as we look ahead to next week and starting at school? I think you had a bit of an idea for how we could sort of wrap up.
I have like a pocket of like reflective questions. You never need to come to me because they just come to me like no other, honestly.
Like a whole errors.
Yes, absolutely. I do have a question that rounds off the topic quite nicely. If you're game, then I will ask away.
Always, let's do it.
Okay. So along the lines of, again, professional conduct, If you had to pick one item that says, I'm a professional teacher, what would it be?
I think, does it have to be a physical item?
No.
So I think if I took a slightly broader interpretation of the question, you can tell me whether it's allowed or not at the moment. I think there's something about teachers bearing. And by that, I just think the way that a teacher carries themselves, I suppose to an extent sort of physically, which I think, and that doesn't mean that I'm saying you need to be big and tall or strong or male or female or stern or friendly. It's something very hard to pinpoint, I think, exactly what it is. But I think the great teachers that I've worked with, so many have had, I think, the kind of bearing of a professional. They've had confidence and pride, but without being arrogant. I think they've been approachable and able to listen, but also able to know when to speak firmly and how to do that in a controlled way. I think they've been enthusiastic, but I think there's something before sort of linking all those, but there's a nice confidence in terms of their bearing. And I think actually that's more important than what they're wearing. With that right bearing, I think you can sort of identify a teacher standing in a playground, even if they weren't in smarter clothes, even if they didn't have the lanyard on. I think there's something about the way that you carry yourself that I think can be really helpful and can be beneficial in those dealings with pupils. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely got the slight sailing reference there as well. Don't worry about that. You're clearly spending
Yes.
too much time by the sea, buddy. Good job. But yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I think it's a great answer. It's definitely, just because it's not something you necessarily wear, you still wear it internally. It's still something you carry around with you. So yeah, love that. I accept.
Thank you. That's lucky. I'm not going to have to work on that further. Right. What about you, though? Is there something I wonder if you've got something in mind?
I do, and it's a physical item. Are you going to accept this answer? I'm going to reverse that on you.
Yeah, on the premise of the original question, it's I'm already happy. Go for it.
Okay, so for me, it has to be my lanyard. The moment I put it on, it feels like I step into teacher mode. It's like my badge of office. You know, I could always carry my planner. I might have a coffee in my hand. I could have a pile of books and resources in my desk in my classroom. But without my lanyard, I just feel like Jen. I just feel like I'm me. Like, because when I have it, it's such a small thing, but it just flips my mind switch into being professional. And it actually makes me feel proud too, because it reminds me of how hard I worked to get here and my journey, and that I've earned my place in this role. So I think it's, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about being proud. Like, you know, you see a teacher being proud of joining the
profession.
The profession. Yeah, exactly. And that's my moment of being proud. I put on every day, and I instantly remembered I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that in any part of my life. And I see it hanging up in my hallway, in my house when I go home. And it reminds me of how lucky I am to do this podcast, to say I'm a teacher and be really proud of that. So yeah, I'm definitely my lanyard. I hope that's an acceptable answer.
No, I get that. And what's interesting is a lot of the time in military units, you've got to have an ID card for access to a base, and you've got to be wearing your lanyard the whole time. And actually, ships or units, sure, we will always be a lanyard specifically for that. Yeah, and that shows who you are, what organization you're part of. And actually, that's a big thing. And I think when you put on a new lanyard because you join a new ship or a new school, I think there is a bit of, you're very publicly part of that. And everything you do is a reflection on that organization, on that community. And I do think it is important, actually. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the lanyard. And it's a good reminder of, who you are and what you stand for when you're in that role.
It's a sense of belonging as well. You know, it makes me feel like my identity. You know, it's a big part of who I am is my job. We spend so many hours, of our life we're going to be there. I'm proud to say, oh, what do you do? And I go, I'm a teacher. And that's a really great thing. And when I see my lanyard and I see my photo and my name, I help guide kids to be, I'm hopefully a role model to some really cool kids I get to teach. So why not?
You are?
Yeah, like why not? Like that's like the one thing I think makes me go, I'm a teacher.
Are you used to telling people when you meet new people now, are you used to telling them that you're a teacher? Does that still sound weird, or have you got used to that?
I still smile. I still go, yeah, I'm a teacher. Which I love. And whenever I meet like another teacher, I'm like, you're a teacher too. And it's like an instant bond. And that sense of community, it extends beyond areas of my life I never thought it would extend to. It's amazing.
It is. And actually, on holiday this week, I've two friends up here who I've been talking to. Both of them are ex-teachers. One was a head in London, the other was a deputy head in a school up here in Scotland. Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to them. They're so excited talking to me and hearing about where I am in my journey and coming into teaching. But it's fun just hearing their background. And I think there's that shared bond of, okay, you know what it's like, and realizing that it's tough but rewarding. And I think it's been really fun talking to them and other teachers. I think it's, as you said, there's a sort of a link, kind of understanding you get when you're in the profession.
Yeah. No, I had a really good friend in Norwich. We've lost touch over the years, but I had a really good friend in Norwich who was a teacher, and I used to idolize her. I just really loved her whole sense of who she was as a person, and being a teacher was so important to her. And I just remember really admiring her for who she was. And even now, my cousin's a math teacher, and I look at her going, I can't wait to be as knowledgeable as you are and get there. I really look at the people around me who've been in the career for years and going, you're amazing. I thank you so much for your service.
That'll be us soon.
I know. That is us. That is us. Nothing soon. That is us. We might still be fractions, but we are teachers.
Ever increasing fractions. Awesome. Well, so good to chat, Jen. If I don't see you before next week, best luck. Have a great first week. You will. I know you will. You approach with so much enthusiasm, but have a great first week in school. Enjoy the steep learning curve and getting to know your new pupils. They will love getting to meet you. So have fun. And I look forward to hearing all about it.
Absolutely, buddy. You too. Good luck with the first week.
It's going to be good. Have fun.
All right, buddy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. I forgot we were on a podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fraction of a Teacher. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Please share a link with your fellow teachers and friends. New episodes released every Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock.
And if you do love it, I suggest you hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and follow us on social media at Fraction of a Teacher Podcast for updates so you never miss anything. We do love hearing from you with your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas. So if you have any, please email us at fractionoat@gmail.com. Until next time, keep smiling.
And keep solving those problems.